himself when he's
That's
like,
right.
oh, crazy.
I don't care if he's here or not. He's been skipping these things for months.
That's the best time when they can't defend themselves.
Why exactly? That's the best time to attack somebody.
Gee, Joe, you swell fella.
Hey, first, Steve, I hope you forgive me for not being on camera today.
Russell, you have the stream on in your
Russell's trying to
background, so
talk.
make sure
they can't defend themselves.
Oh yeah. Oh, I didn't know if Russell was trying to say something or if we were hearing ourselves.
He was trying to say something.
Hey, first, Steve, and everybody, I'm sorry.
Russell, you have to mute the stream on the background.
I'm gonna mute you, Russell, until you figure that out, because that's.
Yeah. Is he wearing headphones?
I bet he has speakers.
Yeah, entirely possible.
If you're gonna have, if you have the stream on while you're in the call, make sure you have it muted.
It's just like in calling on the radio. Make sure you have the radio turned off or turned down. Yeah. Okay, Russell, go ahead.
There we go. That's
cool.
Better. Hey, I hope it's okay that I'm not on cam today. I was not prepared to be last minute.
No problem.
That's fine.
So I looked like crap. It was like, I just still want
to. That's always fine. I don't. Yeah, no. You can show up and not be on camera. I don't care.
So my question, because capitalism is a thing that we often discuss.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you in your last Q&A, Steve, that it's impractical not to have capitalism.
Well, that's not exactly what I said. I said I'm not convinced that a lot of the popularly proposed alternatives are practical, but that doesn't mean that capitalism is like the only practical system that's possible. Like I'm completely open to the possibility that there's other ways to do it. It's just that I don't know of any that people commonly talk about, that I hear about and I think, well, yeah, that would probably work.
Yeah, the problem is testing it in situ, because you can wave your hands all you want, but where the rubber meets the road. I mean, is where you're going to find out whether it actually works in a macro situation or not.
Well, and also transitioning to whatever the next system would be, you would have to transition to it gradually to prevent just utter chaos. And we
have chaos right now anyway.
Well, but I mean, even worse, more destructive chaos than we have now. But I mean, and we as a society, and not, I mean, I would say not just in the United States, but throughout the world, we're really bad at that. We're really bad at gradual transitions to things.
The problem I have with everybody in the discussion, whether they're far left, far right, anything in between, is the idea that there needs to be, or could be, all one way. And quite frankly, I find that a hybrid economy is probably going to produce the overall best results, because when we compare systems, whether they're all one or the other, which is producing the most wealth, but the problem then is about the wealth distribution. And in a hybrid economy, you basically say, okay, private industry handles certain things well, and in other areas, government handles well, or collective action, probably a better way to put it. Collective action handles those things better. So how do we find the line? Where do we draw those lines? And what works the best? So, for instance, like I always say, like, when because obviously the right wing is always going off about government run healthcare. Like, well, no, a single payer system isn't government run; it's government financed. So basically, the government pays for everything, and so it gets the buying power of everybody, and it makes sure that nobody's left out, and then it has the bargaining power of everybody, which is superior to what we have now, where people who have money get excellent care and people who have no money don't.
But that's since you're not before profit.
I just wanted to say, for the record, I agree with Geek.
Okay.
Capitalism does support billionaires, which I hate.
Because
of rich people, that's who we get to vote for leadership.
But see, it doesn't have to. That's the whole thing, though. It doesn't have to support. It doesn't have to support billionaires. That's the whole thing.
But capitalism does create billionaires. It just does. And now it doesn't have to.
No, because we allow it to. Because we allow it to.
That's true. If we had if we had like an actual progressive taxation system,
like we did in the 50s.
So yes. like we had more so in the 50s. Absolutely. I mean, and you know, like if we didn't have such horrendous, vicious income inequality and poverty, I wouldn't mind an odd billionaire here and there. Like it wouldn't be a problem if there if there wasn't so much wealth hoarding at the top that it made it difficult to take care of people at the bottom. You know,
and the worst of it is that hoarding money at the top isn't even good for capitalism.
Well, capitalism is not sustainable, period. It's just not. You talk to any physicist about like exponential growth, they will spit out their cup and it's like, what? Exponential growth? Really? Can the earth grow by 3% each year?
But exponential growth is not required into capitalism either. That's again.
But like that, no, it does.
No. The people who hoard all the money want us to believe. I let you talk, Geek. Please do not interrupt me. People who hoard all the wealth have convinced everybody that that's how it has to be because it's good for them. But it doesn't have to be that way, and it wasn't always that way.
But they're in power,
right? Well, then that's why people need to participate and make that stop.
Well, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Republicans are doing their level best to control the whole situation and keep themselves in power and basically keep the wealthy in power.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I see that. It scares the life out of me.
Yeah. Azalea, you were going to say.
I was just saying that I think there's a distinction between capitalism and commerce. And like to me, you have like wealth accumulation as possibility, let alone a goal, you're going to get to where we are now. Like if we have a society that values wealth accumulation for its own sake, and any like profit seeking at all, it's eventually going to lead to Reagan and Thatcher. Like it's just going to get there eventually. We have to remove like the profit seeking from the eventually, transition and all that. But like we can do something with, we can like reduce the number of billionaires, but there shouldn't be any billionaires. It's impossible to get that much money ethically.
So,
right? It should be like any billionaires. It just shows that like we're okay with exploitation on some level.
Yes, that's my problem with capitalism. Capitalism is inherently exploitative, no matter what. Even the nice friendly boss can be say, no, well, we're like a family. I'm a good boss. I do all those sort of things. But in order to compete in the capitalist system, the ones that like have the more capital and are less scrupulous will like win out. When the line goes down, you're going to make more machines.
So what happens when a company is in business and things aren't going well, but the boss makes sure everyone gets paid and takes large sums of their own money and puts it back into business to make sure everyone else gets paid, even though they're working and aren't getting paid for their own labor? Then what?
Chances are over time that boss and that business will fail because the unscrupulous ones that will just throw their employees under the bus will crush them because they will accumulate more power over time because wealth can be transferred for power and power can be bought with wealth.
Yes, that's the problem with like there being billionaires is not because of like they have more stuff. That's not the problem that we as anarchists, communists, and socialists have. It's the fact that they are billionaires, they have more power over us. As the founding fathers, one of the founding fathers said that like, and he was the guy who like created the justice system as it is. He said the people who own the country should rule the country. And this was the country founded by rich white men who were slave owners.
Yeah, I know. I'm descended from almost of those, a bunch of those slaves.
Yeah, that's white not really a point that's in dispute. Yeah. But no, and I'm not like I've said before when we've had these discussions, like I'm not against all of the critiques of the current system. I'm completely on board with. I mean, at least in terms of tendencies, I'm kind of with serious mind. I kind of agree that a lot of them aren't. I don't know if they're necessarily as inevitable. I think it could be possible to have an economy that is that if it was actually properly regulated by a government that was operated and peopled by officials that actually cared about taking care of, income equality and stop, enforcing regulations that would prevent that kind of exploitation. Like, I don't think it's as hopeless as some people say it is, but the general idea of, unfettered capitalism, attaching the profit motive to everything, commercializing or
monetizing everything.
That's a road to ruin, and that's,
I agree with
and that there's, I completely agree with that.
Yeah. You can accuse me of being a little naive as it comes to this. I mean, I don't know as I'm a capitalist or a socialist. Mostly, I'm crazy. But,
Okay.
allow me to throw this out. Back in the 50s, we had a system where, at one point, the highest income tax rate was 90%, and it was scaled down. It was scaled on a grade, and the working class people were able to take care of business. Where that stopped, in my humble opinion, was with Reagan, where he introduced supply side economics and this whole trickle down bullshit, and we have yet to recover from that.
Right. Nixon before that too, but Reagan ramped it up.
Nixon started it off, but Reagan really. Reagan's the one who drove the whole thing off the road and was "Yay!"
Off a road, off a cliff,
off a cliff. Yeah,
because when the top marginal rate's 91%, it's a huge disincentive on trying to keep any more of the wealth because you're not going to get most of it. And that's the thing. Most people didn't actually ever pay 91% tax. What ended up happening was they would invest more money in their business, pay their workers more, have more benefits, pensions, and all this kind of stuff. Because there's no point in keeping that last 9%, the last little bit, because you're not going to get most of it anyway.
And who tried to tear all of that down? The guys with the bread.
Yeah, and they will always try to tear it down.
Yes,
and it's at least in theory possible that every time they build themselves up, that there could be a backlash that brought them back down. But in general, the lasting solution almost has to be the power be distributed in a method other than wealth. It will always, if power is distributed with wealth, it will always try to reform the sharpest pyramid.
Well, I mean, basically, a big part of the problem is when you have 45% of the population that doesn't participate, because that's the one center of power we have is the vote. But of course, the people with money try to convince us that it's pointless, and so when we believe them, it becomes pointless.
Make it pointless.
They make it pointless.
Make it pointless.
Yeah.
But
they don't only try to convince us; they try to actually make it pointless.
That's right. But I'll point out, when we're talking about, well, maybe it could happen. Look at the Scandinavian countries. The Scandinavian countries still do what we used to do. They have a market economy, but they also regulate the fuck out of it, and they tax the shit out of it, and they don't have anywhere near the problem with wealth inequality that we have here. And they have most of the things we all would like. We, single payer healthcare, have actually a real justice system and not a criminal, basically criminalizing the poor system. They do all the things that most of us would like, because they regulate their market system.
Yeah,
the Scandinavian countries still benefit immensely from settler colonialism and imperialism. That's also part of the process that we'll have to do decolonize.
Yeah, that's pretty much everywhere white people have been. Yes, we know.
Yeah, but I mean, and that's a good point. But also, it's a point that I make a lot when I try to sort of steer people toward more practical solutions, as opposed to let's just trash the whole current system and come and replace it with something. There are examples in other parts of the world of countries that still do, in a very broad sense, what we do in this country in terms of government and economy, but do not have nearly the same problems that we have, or have the same problems we have, but not nearly to the degree that we have them. They have implemented reforms and solutions that seem relatively stable because they've been in place for decades and people seem to like them, And, you know, not that they don't have problems, because even in, you know, those Scandinavian countries, there are white supremacist movements, there are anti-government movements. Like nothing, it's never going to be perfect. As long anywhere there's people, if we learned anything from Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, it's that wherever there are people, there will never be peace. But
that's actually a closing line from one episode, isn't it?
From it's the one, I can't remember the title, but it's the one where the
astronauts land on this
on the asteroid, that turns out to be a big cemetery, because you are men, and where there are men, there can never be peace. Ain't that
and yet this is a man talking. So
well, he's a robot. He's a robot man. He's a robot man. He's okay, but but the idea that what I always try to suggest is let's hear, and just specifically for us Americans, let's try to get to the point where Norway is, you know, and try that for a while and see how we like it. And then once we get up to that point, then maybe we can be like, you know what, maybe we can start working on transitioning out of this capitalist thing altogether, you know, because like to suggest that the solution from where we are is get rid of capitalism, you know, or and radically reform or rethink government institutions. Like that's such a long way to go. And it feels like from here to Scandinavian countries is already a pretty long way. but seems more achievable. So, you know,
plus the fact all the places where they have tried that, like just sudden, or they had a revolution and they threw off and we're going to do it, they didn't end well either.
No, the USS coup them.
This is something that I come into all the time. Anytime you make a change, I'll never forget this from this is my old stuff from Pace and Dynamic Systems. You have a transient solution and a steady state solution, and the transient solution is always a nightmare.
Change is always hard, but at one point is it that like burning down and burning down the system, rioting becomes the lesser of three evils.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that burning down the system, there's got to be a more elegant way of going from point A to point B.
And it's always said by people who've never built anything.
Also, another point in the realm of science. A new theory takes hold, often, of course, in the history of science, and David Graeber and David Rigo brought up in The Dawn of Everything. How science changes not because the proponents of the new theory are able to convince the proponents of the old theory that the new theory is more correct, as it were, or more works better. No, how that new theory takes hold is that the proponents of the old theory just die out. I just hope we don't have to get to that point yet. But if that's what has happened, okay, then we'll just have to protect our comrades that are suffering right now under capitalism until we reach to that point.
Well, the three biggest examples: Soviet Union, North Korea.
Soviet Union was not socialist. It was like Lenin at least was trying to employ Marxist vision, as it were. I don't agree with how Lenin's process they're doing it, as it were, because he also dissolved the constitutional assembly when the Vanguard Party, his party, did not win all the votes, as it were. And so he rates state and socialism, state revolution as a retcon to justify that action, as it were. So he said, no, but we're in charge. We're just going to be in charge, and how this do it. And he did not want Stalin in charge. He did not want Stalin in charge, and Stalin's a monster. So now Lenin did a lot of wrong things too. And again, don't agree with Lenin in a lot of ways. But they still it was still capitalism, but it was just a different kind of capitalism. It's just the government running things as well.
Yeah. So this is the thing. I mean, basically, it's just like when I talk to right-wing libertarians about their version of anarchy, and it's like, well, this isn't the anarchy we
There's no such thing as right-wing anarchy.
People are involved, and none of these idyllic systems are ever going to be functional because people are people.
So we should not do anything then.
No,
there's no perfect system.
No. See, that's a bullshit argument too, because the idea is that, okay, what is achievable, and let's do that. And
anarchism is achievable.
We already know. I didn't interrupt you.
Be nice. I didn't interrupt you. Both of you, be nice. Be nice, please.
In Norway, what happens in Norway works. We know that that's achievable, but we're not even doing that. So, like Steve said, let's get there. And then maybe, who knows, maybe your idea will work in the future. We're not there yet. Because unless you breed greed out of humanity, because that's the thing, capitalism didn't invent greed, okay? Feudalism was around, and all sorts of other exploitative systems existed before it. So unless you breed a better human, you're not going to get rid of greed, right? So what we have to do is we have to control it and keep it from getting out of hand.
We're not necessarily always greedy inherently. There are lots of indigenous cultures that were not greedy, that were genocided by greedy people. Like, it's not, we don't have to breed out the greed. We need to focus on, I don't know, I wouldn't say breed is the right word. It's like,
maybe we need to incentivize against it. I think that if you can create a positive incentive not to be excessively avaricious, you might have something there. How you do that? Hey, I'm an engineer, not a sociologist. Do not ask me.
There need to be cultural shifts, like some pretty extreme cultural shifts from where we are now. And like somebody mentioned, we were mentioning earlier, like the way the income tax structure in this country was in the 50s. Imagine if we could get back to something like that and also take out the racism, because that's the thing about the 50s. I mean, there were a lot of white people that benefited from the burgeoning middle class and the graduated income tax in the 50s. Most black folks were still getting the short end of the stick. So if we could take the racism out of it and go back to go ahead.
One could make a pretty compelling argument that the majority of the benefit of that period wasn't because we had stripped power from the wealthy, but because it just changed who was being exploited to those people, and the benefits of the middle class were not because the ruling class lost power, but because more power was stripped from the minorities in the towards the
there was still less income inequality though.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you
it's
could
gotten
say
worse income inequality.
I don't think you could, and I don't think you could. I mean, I don't think you could say that, and I certainly would never try to argue that like the ruling class lost its power in the 50s. Like that clearly was not the case. But the 50s had a more sane, fair taxation system. Again, mostly to the benefit of white people. The 50s had things like the GI Bill, which again mostly benefited white people, but
exclusively actually.
Yeah, so it wouldn't just it was income tax, it was more broadly accessible college education, like an entire generation of white World War II veterans were able to take advantage of higher education, and I think that clearly had a positive impact. Now, if you could have done that, not just with the white people, but with everybody, and also go back to actually taxing the rich at appropriate rates and using that revenue to aid people at the bottom of the pyramid instead of at the top, that in and of itself, which in today's political climate seems virtually impossible to achieve.
Yeah. And that tends to be the point where I disagree with the people who are saying, like, let's go with what is possible, because the people who don't want any change will always try to frame what's possible as lower. It's like, okay, we'll do that. We'll bring back the ability for white people to get ahead and bring back the GI, bring all that back.
Yeah.
But it's not tenable to also do that for all immigrants and minorities, like,
well,
that will always be put in, and it's hard to just agree, like, let's just do what's possible, unless you're also always pushing what is considered possible.
Sure, absolutely. But this is the thing. This is the argument I always have with progressives about incremental change. Yeah, if you can get a big change, absolutely get it, right? But it's better to make change in the direction you want to go than stagnation, or worse yet, retrograde. And the thing is, just because you make a compromise today, it doesn't mean you made a compromise forever. Move that Overton window in the right direction, right? So because basically it's kind of like, think about like with okay, marriage equality. So there was a point even in the early 90s, the majority of the populace was not in favor of, you know, 2 men or 2 women getting married. They just weren't. But one of the things that, ironically, that DOMA did is it actually opened things up for states to be able to do what they wanted. So your marriage only counted in that state, but at least so the more progressive states said, hey, well, we're going to allow it because we think that's that's equality. That's how it should be. So then when all the fever nightmares of the right wing that, oh, it was going to destroy, you know, society and all this kind of stuff didn't materialize, more and more like less progressive states were starting to say, well, they didn't fall into the abyss, you know, maybe we should allow it. And then eventually, by the time it got to the Supreme Court, 31 states had already had marriage equality. So at that point, I remember it was really with John Roberts. You know, he's not a law liberal. He's very conservative, but he was looking at like, well, wait, if I rule with you anti-marriage equality people, it means I got to tell 31 states, a whole bunch of, you know, thousands, maybe millions of people that their marriage is null and void, and he wasn't willing to take that step. So then that became the law of the land. It pushed the penny, and why? Because again, people. It basically normalized it in society. That's why normalization is so important. So that's why trans people right now are going through hell. But those of us who support trans rights, we understand we got to get out there and we have to support them, and we have to normalize it everywhere and anywhere and everywhere, because eventually people will move in that direction. But it's going to be tough.
Joe, the only problem with that is that something that was normalized for considerably longer just got clobbered. That is to say, the right for a woman to choose. And the current court goes after that, what's next? I mean, I fully expect Loving versus Virginia to come up at some point or other. And again, I mean, this makes me heartsick.
Well, and this is why we cannot allow Republican fascists to get control of the levers of power.
Precisely.
They want to push us back. They want to push back to the 50s, not the economic,
not the good parts of the 50s.
Only the bad part.
The worst parts of the
50s. Part. That's what they want.
Yeah. Oh, Katie, you were trying to say something a minute ago, and you got kind of steamrolled. Did you have something to say?
Oh, y'all brought up the GI Bill. Like, it's not just about the fact that it was all white people. Even if they brought it back now, it would just be physically fit people who are able to join the military. And I say that.
Right,
oh, absolutely.
Without the without the homophobia, without all the other isms aside from racism.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, then maybe let's not make it the GI Bill. Let's just make it colleges free.
I was going to say Bernie Sanders on
education equals free.
Yeah.
Well,
here's the thing. Two things. One, the GI Bill still exists. It didn't go away. It's been modified, so it's not exclusively white males.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, and actually, what's interesting, and this is what's going on now with Florida, a few other states, and this is where Tommy Tuberville is causing major havoc. He's holding up promotions in the military because it's funny, the military, for all as much as obviously progressives tend to not be in favor of the military tends to be actually more progressive than a lot of the rest of society.
Yeah,
and so
surprisingly,
right now. So what the military has basically said, hey, service members who want gender affirming care, who need abortions, whatever, anything where it's being disallowed in that state, they're giving leave to allow people to go to states that actually have, rational policies and allowing them to get the care that they need.
So that's
so what Tuberville is standing in the way is he wants that to stop, and he's basically saying, well, we're not going to promote these 184 people who have nothing to do with the policy decision whatsoever, because he hates LGBTQ people, he hates abortions, and he's willing to basically hold things up just try to stop it. But again, the military is like, no, these are service members and they need medical care, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
So Katie. I'm putting together stuff. I'm in the Army, for those who don't know. I've been trying to put together for a couple of months now, like for soldiers who are stationed in places like Florida or Missouri or Texas. Like, yeah, you just brought up the reproductive care part of it, but we're actually having to dig out old regulations from like the 60s that were applied to troops who had darker skin tones than a paper bag, and being able to give people priority for on-post housing, giving people priority for giving their kids the on-post schools.
Right.
Because in some of those states, it's not unfeasible that our marriages wouldn't be recognized at some point in the future. That if I as a trans person who is in the military, like if I get stationed in Florida and I take my kids with me, if we live off post, there's a non-zero chance that my existence could be declared a form of child abuse. And so I would need, if I got stationed down in a place like that, or if somebody like me got stationed down there, that we would need to find those protections within the military to, you know, if they're going to send us down there, to that we'll still be able to exist. So like I say, yeah, we're having to dig out regulations from like the 60s to try and address this stuff. Yeah. Stuff that's still on the books, but it hasn't been used in decades.
And just think about how ridiculous that is to anybody, those of us who are not in the military, who haven't had to deal with it, you know, in like a real-time basis. Compare that to all the bullshit rhetoric that comes from the right wing, where it's all rah military, we love our troops, and then the idea that people who are in the military right now, who belong to categories that those same right-wingers think are unworthy of rights, have to jump through these hoops so that they can be safely deployed to stations in the United States, not in some hostile land overseas, but like Florida.
Hostile land here.
Yeah, like, I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, it's been like this my entire life, even before trans people became like the favorite target of these people. It's always been the pro-military stuff from Republicans has always been empty rhetoric. It's always been, you know, it's always been, we love the troops, we love the army, but when it comes when the rubber hits the road, it's like, well, do you want to pay them what they deserve to be paid? Probably not. Do you want to make sure that their rights are protected, that people from different categories, from different groups who enlist can serve openly and get the protections they deserve? Probably not. You know, it's
pay for
it's
the
all
medical
empty.
care.
Yeah, medical care.
You want to continue taking care of them when the
sacrifice they make. Yeah, it's all empty rhetoric.
My pet peeve as it comes to all of this, and the big one, and it's a huge one these days, do you want to help these guys rotate back into regular society after having suffered PTSD? That is a huge one, and I have yet to see it addressed.
Yeah. Basically, Republicans love weapon systems and bombing poor brown countries.
Because it's macho.
Yeah.
He was like, if your country's full of brown people, tell them to watch the fuck out.
Yeah, I mean, even that Robert has been on this like a Patreon member hangout in the past, and like he's talked about how also in like the UK they're very like trans open, and that's Turf Island too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Robert was saying years ago when
Robert who?
When serving when we were,
he's one of the old members of
he hasn't been here for a while, but
4 years.
He's like an army vet over in the UK, and
the guy with the mustache.
Yeah, and he would say like when we were grappling with these issues in our military, like, should we let gay people serve openly? Should we let trans people serve openly? He was like, over in England, they were like, we've been doing that for years and it's fine. We really don't get it. And yeah, like Geek just said, that's Turf Island. Like you know, I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know who would win a who treats trans people worse contest between the United States and the UK at this point, because
that's no contest you want to win.
We both seem to be doing pretty rotten at that. So I don't know. And obviously as a cis person, I have no idea from personal experience, but I mean, it seems like in both places, neither country is a place that a trans person would necessarily choose to be if they had a choice right now.
And again, the Scandinavians were way ahead of us on this.
Yeah. Isaiah.
Like voting between a giant douche and turd sandwich. Like
exactly.
I mean, and UK seems a little bit less safe somehow to me. I'm certainly not going soon, but like this place sucks too. Like it's for trans rights and for every other right practically.
Yeah,
it's a real toss up to me.
And I saw it's drove me nuts. Tom Cotton, who's one of the most vile people in the Senate.
Oh yeah, that guy.
He was like, he brings up someone who wasn't a trans person, who was pretending to be a trans person with the express purpose of discrediting trans people and a crime that they committed, and then trying to blame trans people for it. I'm like, some man in a dress. I'm like, yeah, right. That was a man in a dress, not a trans woman. Yeah. That's a fucking difference, you asshole. You're blaming trans women for what a cis het man did to try to hurt
on purpose.
On purpose.
Can you say straw man, boys and girls?
I mean, it was. I wanted to reach. I've never wanted to reach through the internet and strangle the shit out of somebody more than when I'm watching that fucking video.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the only reason why Tom Cotton isn't the world's worst man in the Senate is because you got Cruz, you got what's his face from Carolina, and throw in
Lindsey Graham from
exactly,
and Tuberville.
Rubio,
and Tuberville.
There's
Rubio is small potatoes by comparison.
Yeah, I know Rubio is actually. I mean,
he's almost a liberal.
Rubio is a piece of shit, but compared to a lot of his Republican colleagues, you start to think, I don't know, maybe he's not the worst.
He's more like a rabbit turd than.
Yeah.
As compared to cow flop.
Because I think Rubio's thing is he's just such a mealy-mouthed little coward. Like Rubio, I mean, at least the other pieces of shit have the guts to just be pieces of shit out in public and be like, yeah, that's right, I don't give a fuck. And, and fuck them. They're garbage, but Rubio's like, I don't know, do I give a fuck? Maybe I do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing. This actually helps illustrate the difference between values and ideals.
Go on.
Ideals are what we would like to be, or we'd like people to think we are. So Rubio's got ideals that are better than who he is, but his values are shit. He isn't better. He isn't better than he wants to be. He wants like us to believe that he's better than he is. So he puts on that. That's why he's mealy mouthed. It's like, oh, I don't really want to come. I don't have the confidence of a conviction to say how shitty I really am. I want you to think I'm actually not quite so shitty.
That's been the pattern.
He doesn't want to hurt those people, but he's willing to sacrifice them.
Yeah.
Well, and this is what I say about people who, like, I know people who didn't vote in the last two presidential elections because they didn't like the choices. And I get that you didn't like the choices, and I understand why you didn't like the choices, but those were the choices we had. And so to me, I'm like, so you're basically, if you didn't vote to stop the worst, the bigger harm, then you basically said to all those people that were going to be harmed, yeah, what's going to happen is terrible, but you know what? I just feel better, and it's really not going to affect me. So fuck you, basically. And the thing is, I don't need somebody. I mean, it'd be nice to be enthusiastic and vote enthusiastically, but as a black man in America, I've always voted defensively. It's always like, what's gonna do the least, cause the least amount of fucking up.
Yeah.
So we can survive into the next part.
I'm one of those few people that didn't vote because I couldn't decide between Trump and Biden. I couldn't stand either one of them. And that's what our choices came down to.
Well,
like I said in our Q&A, Steve, we have 331 million people, and it comes down to two people to vote again.
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily like I've made videos in the past where I've talked about how I think it should be like the ballot should be more accessible, to minor parties. Like I don't think it should be as expensive or as difficult to, not just for the presidential race, but for congressional races and pretty much everything. Like I think in a lot of districts, the the ballot requirements are weighted in favor of Republicans and Democrats. Like if you're running as a Republican or a Democrat, it's a lot easier to get on the ballot than if you're running as an independent or as a member of a minor party. And I don't think that's fair, and I would like to see that change. But I mean,
it's also still first past the post wear and take.
Yeah.
Also,
oh yeah. Yeah. I've talked about like instant runoff voting and stuff like that. I'm in favor of that too. Like I think that would be a much better system than first past the post. But the problem isn't really that it comes down to 2 people in a country of 330 million people. I mean, if it came down to 5 people in a country of 330 million people, that's still a small amount of people that the 330 million have to choose from. Like that's just kind of how a national election works. I don't think that's really the issue. The issue is what do those 2 people represent? And what are they likely to, what policies are they likely to champion? And, how are they likely to use whatever executive power they have as the president, like that's the problem, not necessarily. Because, I mean, unless we're talking about, again, just radically rethinking the entire system and saying, let's just not have a president. Well, okay, then we need to figure out what we're going to do instead.
Councils.
And it's just that easy. Okay, but I mean, you know what I'm saying. But you know what I'm saying. Like as long as we have the system that we have, and even if we decided tomorrow, okay, we're going to shift to a completely different system, we would still have the system that we have now for a while because we wouldn't want to just flip over. It's always we're always going to have a limited number of choices in terms of who actually gets these jobs, and it's the quality of the choices that matters more to me than it always comes down to 2 guys.
Yeah. And I want to point out too, as far as councils go, we have it's a council we already have, Congress, and that's a shit show.
That's true.
So the idea that Congress is some magical whiteout that's going to solve all the problems is completely and utterly destroyed by the representation we have in our actual Congress, right?
Well, so I have my problems with representative democracy, period, because how is one person can represent 30,000 people, as it were, and to represent all the values, as it were, because like this is something that like a lot of voters come up with.
Are you going to vote on? Are you going to everybody vote on every single thing that happens?
I don't say why not, or have to distribute the power not to like a top down, but like more bottom up, more powers given to the local councils more than anything else, and so by the city councils.
We have distributed government. That's why we have town, county, state governments in addition to the federal government. We have that.
But the federal government. Go ahead, John.
There is something to everyone voting for every single thing does sound daunting, but there is something to be said for a system that would allow for everyone to vote for everything that matters.
It would be.
I would be very careful about that.
And then if there is things that don't really matter to you, can easily.
So, are you talking about a form of
votes.
like syndicalism?
Yeah,
exactly. Syndicalist.
Okay.
But like Joe the Indigenous Heretic has explained on such just the Alchemy one of the past shows is like that's how the Lakota people also like do things. It's like in many different like councils. It's not just like one chief that's the chief of the Lakota people. There's like the war chief, there's like the ministry chief, and like those are also not like supreme power position, more of honorary positions, more of like a wise person to like you can go to seek counsel for, but they'll just like try to guide you to like where you can get or like offer suggestions as it were about like everyone is a group decides together.
Well, that's really no different than what we have now. I mean, you have your town government, you have your maybe your county government, you have your state government, and you have all these different layers and different levels. But again, in a country where anywhere between 45 to 65 of the people don't participate now with voting like a couple times a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we do direct democracy where everybody votes for everything, yeah, that would be my concern too.
I agree. It will cry a lot of change along with everything else, like getting rid of capitalism, because I don't think a boss-worker hierarchy is a just hierarchy. Period.
Well, see, the thing is also when you compare agrarian cultures, where basically agrarian cultures tend to be more communal because they kind of need to be, right? So people and you have the time of your working time, and there is a lot of time when you're not working. And so people will then get together and discuss all these issues. We don't have that. We live in a technological society where people work every day.
But we give rid of capitalism, we give rid of a lot of compulsory work that is not necessary to need to move on, which is why I'm anti-work. Not anti-all work, period, because there is necessary work, but I'm anti the compulsory works we're forced to do under capitalism in order to survive, because we have to pay for rent, have to buy food, have to buy for all those things. And if you can't work, you are suffering. Charity links.page, I'll quickly jump in and say, Phoenix's birthday was also yesterday, so if you want to help out Phoenix, give them money. They can usually use it as it were. Their links are in charitylinks.page, and I'll post them into the live chat at the end of the show as well. And so Steve,
yes.
Linoquin and Naz, they did get the down payment by Friday.
Oh, good.
It got on Thursday, actually. So that part they don't have to worry about. Now they just have to raise like $2,000 or $2,200 by June 29th. So they're out of the emergency situation, but they still have to raise $2,000.
But they still need,
I'd like to agree with Geek on something. I know he and I don't agree very much. So when it does happen, it's a momentous, and I'd like to point it out.
Okay, yes, sure thing.
So I do. So I would say probably one of my biggest problems, with the system we currently have. And again, capitalism, we're gonna call it as a wrapper, but it's deeper than that. But it's consumerism, and basically you're right. So what ends up happening is we create a system of false choices. And so there's 85 different varieties of coffee, which you don't really need 85 different varieties of coffee,
or 16 different Dr. Peppers that are all Dr. Peppers.
Yeah, well, right, exactly. So what ends up happening is you have a lot of waste because you fill up shelves with something for the illusion of choices, and a lot of that stuff ends up in landfills and doesn't get consumed. So you're wasting resources. Consumerism wastes lots of resources. So I agree with you, totally agree with you there, that we wouldn't need to produce anywhere near as much stuff, or at least not for ourselves, if we weren't wasting so much, because consumerism basically is built around, well, in order to maximize the amount of money we can squeeze out of people, we got to have 85 different versions of coffee, even though it's all there's really 12 and the rest are all bullshit.
And there's definitely ways that one could reduce things even with that system, still allowing for those choices, when instead of using even more resources to both dispose of the additional things, but also to make sure that police are funded so that people are not allowed to take it out of dumpsters, or that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, we spend so much money making the lives of the homeless more miserable than it already is. We could actually use that. We could more than it would cost to house them and feed them. That's the most fucked up part. What kind of warped society are we when we say something like, when you go into towns where all the benches have middle things to keep people from sleeping on them, and
paint them rainbow to be pride friendly too.
And every railing that someone could sit on has a spike on it to prevent and they say it's for birds. It's not for birds. It's to stop.
It's not for fucking birds. Shut up.
Aggressive design. They term it aggressive design.
And the sad thing is, it's necessary for the way the system is set up now.
It's not necessary. We've chosen it. We've chosen it.
Wait, hold up. I'm going to follow. I'm going to explain. If the lives of homeless people weren't so bad, if they didn't make it so awful to be homeless, if people could just set up tents in parks and not be stopped, people who are just getting by, slaving away for 60 hours because they can't find a job that pays enough with 40, they would not do it. And the system would fall apart if people weren't willing to work too many hours at jobs that are killing them.
Again, maybe a few, but I don't think the system would fall apart. You'd have maybe a few.
Well, the system as it is now.
As it is now, yes.
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple of points. First of all, I mean, the aggressive design stuff, correct me if I'm wrong, at least to the extent that we see it in cities today, is a relatively recent thing. Like when I was a kid, I don't remember, spikes on all the railings and, little pyramids under. So, I mean, and I've never been homeless. I got the impression homelessness sucked in the 80s, too. Maybe it sucks more now, but it sucked back then too. And, and it reminds me a little bit of, I have a video going up tomorrow that touches on a little bit of like the failures in our prison system here in the U.S. because I watched there was an episode of Dateline last week where it wasn't about the prison system at all, but there was a little detail at the end of it. There's a guy, maybe some of you have heard the story of Nicholas Alaverdian, who is an American sex offender who faked his own death and moved to Scotland and changed his name and got arrested for charges that are pending against him back here. And the Scottish authorities, had a court hearing to determine that he was actually the person that they thought he was and not the person he was claiming to be. So this June, they're going to have an extradition hearing, and the judge is probably going to say, okay, send him back to the U.S. to face charges. But the problem is they still might not send him back at that point because Scotland legally might not be able to send him back because our prisons don't meet the standards of the European Convention of Human Rights.
Interesting.
Yeah. So my video is about that, and one of the points I make in it is, even if we did have a more humane prison system, it's not like people would be committing crimes just to get put in it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, not in significant numbers. Maybe a few desperate people might consider that. But for the most part, it's not like if we had a prison system that actually met globally recognized human rights standards that people would be like, oh, got to get in there. It's still prison. Like you don't.
I actually, it's kind of fun. It wouldn't be in great numbers, but even the way prison is now, and even the way what's the word?
Incarceration?
Like mandatory or involuntary mental health holds are now. Like, even as bad as that system is now, there are people there are homeless people who, when desperate enough, will commit crimes or will act crazy just to get to get meals and a place to stay, over the winter, and that sure does happen, even with how bad the system is now. So it's hard to,
But what bothers me, we really made it so stark for me is and most of you know who Tracy Harris is. She lives in Austin, and she and I, when I was one of the times I was down there visiting, she took me around and she was showing me all the people who live under bridges because it's a shelter away from the wealth from the elements, and how supposedly liberal Austin was passing, doing all these things to, the aggressively anti-homeless, things of, and then anti-camping laws and all this, basically to criminalize being homeless.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, shit, if that's what we're doing in what's considered like a liberal bastion in Red Texas, what the fuck? Like wow. Like, if that's what people on who lean left are doing. We're pretty perverse to society.
Yes. I have a comrade that's lives in Los Angeles area, and they've been she's probably doing practice right now of helping unhoused comrades as well. Oh man, maybe I should actually ask her if I should put their collectives a fundraising thing in the charity links, because I can go try and find that this work. If I probably won't find it today, but I'll put in charity links page and charity links page, charity links page, charity links page. We're actually also close to we're 7 minutes left of the hour, so we haven't had talk about Star Trek. All of you,
it's just radical. Actually, we could talk about Star Trek for a few minutes, but I do want to mention one thing, because since we brought up the aggressive architecture stuff, I don't know if anybody has seen the Netflix show Kunk on Earth.
I don't have Netflix anymore because of Dave Chappelle.
Really funny.
It's on YouTube.
Okay.
It's really funny, and I highly recommend it. It's really funny, and it's like a mockumentary where the presenter she's playing a character. The character her name is Philomena Kunk, and she's like the presenter of this documentary series on human history, and it's 5 parts, and the episodes are only half an hour each, so it's a quick watch if you have like a couple hours to binge it, and it's so goddamn funny. And she does a great deadpan character where she's talking to real people. She's talking like to actual experts and stuff, scholars, etc., and she's asking them the most ridiculous questions with a complete straight face. And one of the things is she's talking to someone about the pyramids in Egypt, and she says, why are they shaped like that? Is that to stop homeless people from sleeping on them?
Oh, good Lord.
And the scholar has to be like, well, I don't think there was as much homelessness in ancient Egypt. You know, like they have to give her like a serious answer to this ridiculous question. But you know, it gets at like an actual problem. You know, like, oh yeah, that's a thing that happens, isn't it?
Oh, and Diane Morgan is the name of the actor.
Diane Morgan is the actress. Yeah, she's brilliant. She's brilliant. Yeah. It's
some of the people she's interviewing are making a truly heroic effort to not.
The guy who was like the Roman historian.
Yes.
Because she asked him about throwing Christians to the lions, and he says first he tries to give a serious answer and say, well, I don't think that happened as often as people might think. And she's like, right, but do you think the lions resented it always having to eat the same thing? And you know, like, do you think the Christians forgave the lions as they were being eaten? Like, and he's just like staring at her, trying to figure out, like, wait a minute, what should I say here?
Did you see the guy that she talked to about the Soviet onion?
The Soviet onion. Oh, no. And he was like, if you'd like to talk about Russian vegetables, we can do that.
I did find
forgive them, Father, for lions do not understand religious intolerance.
I did find a link to the mutual aid fund. I'll put it in the live chat now, but I'll also add the chart links in that
good. Well. So anyway, Star Trek, go.
No, I have one Star Trek because I have to admit, Steve, I have not watched your series on Picard because I've seen your comments on Facebook.
We probably disagree. Yeah.
And while I'm not as ape over as because people are going crazy over it, but I'm like, I think I get your point because look, we and I've talked about we about over the top fan service and stuff like that. But I felt like in this one. This was supposed to be kind of a last hurrah, so of course you're going to try to put in all the things from before, and kind of that's kind of the point of it. So I other than like probably episode 3, I think it was, which dragged a bit. I generally liked the series and I had a good time.
My theory.
Well, you would agree with Jason then. Jason really liked it too. Yes,
it's so much fun watching you disagree on stuff.
No, I agree.
I really hope that you can talk him into watching a series that you like and he doesn't, because those are literally my favorite late seatings. When you get when you get to a film, it's like no, Steve, this is dumb. Why do you like this? It's so good.
I was listening back. We just put up our review of The Searchers. Which I gave a positive review to, and he gave a negative review to. And we got to the end of it, and I got to the end of my review bit, and then I said, "Okay, Jason, your turn." And he said, "Well, it's a really good movie if you're an apologist for racists."
Yes.
And I was like, "Yeah."
Wait,
and then he said, and then
Searchers,
The Searchers, the John Wayne Western, and then he also said. And then he apologizes for saying that, and then he says, "No, sometimes you just can't take the Maryland out of a boy." And I was like, God, you apologize, and then you just come right back at me with another one.
I swear I listened to the Roadhouse one like 3 times just because the dynamic on that episode is so good.
That one kind of surprised me. I didn't necessarily think he would like it as much as I do, but he seemed to not even get why I like it, which was weird. It's like it's just a fun movie. Like I get that it's not like good in the traditional sense, but like how can you watch it and not...
It's a guilty pleasure. That's what it is.
How can you watch it and not have a great time? Well, Jason watched it and did not have a great time.
No, I hated every moment.
He hated it.
There's a bunch of movies I like that I know that are technically bad movies, but I just love him. Like there's a movie from the like early '80s called Jekyll and Hyde Together Again. It's Mark Blankfield, and it's just this goofy movie. And basically, he's his doctor. He's Dr. Jekyll, and he's working on this serum to do some whatever, and you know he accidentally ingests it, and it turns him into Mr. Hyde. But he kind of goes, you know, he goes back and forth between the two, and it's just goofy and silly, and you know it certainly got panned by, you know, every critic in existence. But I love that movie, you know. And one of the things, they had this character who was clearly supposed to be like Howard Hughes. His name is Hubert Howes. And he's ancient, and he's getting a complete transplant. All his organs can be transplanted, but Jekyll doesn't want to do the surgery, and he goes, Hubert House can stick it up his ass, and the guy's like, he doesn't have an ass. That's one of the things we're replacing.
Such a bad joke.
The one that I always go to, it's like that people either get it and love it, or it doesn't hit them and they probably hate it, or just Death to Smoochie.
Yeah,
that's cool.
That one had a little bit of a comeback, didn't it?
If that movie doesn't hit you right, you're gonna really dislike it because it's unpleasant.
I remember when it came out, like it got just horrible reviews, but then about maybe 10 years later, you started seeing just a trickle of people, like, you know, online talking about it and going, you know, actually, I thought that was kind of funny. Like, I think people just, like you said, people just didn't get it. They're like, this just isn't, I just don't like watching this. These aren't very nice people, and they're doing, you know,
it's, what do you call it? I'm trying to remember who wrote that, but a lot of their stuff is like that, where it's dark comedy in like the darkest sense, and if you don't if you don't like that kind of humor and it doesn't hit you at the right time, you're not only gonna not like it, you're gonna hate it.
The thing is, it's the only Edward Norton film I actually like.
There's your problem. He's been in some good movies. That's interesting. Okay, with whole fairness, like Matt Stone and Trey Parker, they're total loathsome douches, as it were. But I respect them that, like, they would honestly say, listen, if you're watching South Park Big and Long and Uncut or Team America World Police, and in the first 15 minutes, like, I don't think this is kind of movie for me. Leave. No, you have our blessings to leave the movie.
Don't watch it.
Don't watch it.
It's not going to get better for you.
No, it's not.
As it comes to that, it's interesting. Just out of nowhere and for fun, because there was so much buzz about it, I got myself a Blu-ray of Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I watched it with my wife.
What'd you think?
I thought it was nuts. My wife hated it. And further, my best friend, who is probably a bigger film nut than I am, watched it, and he hated it.
Wow.
So to my mind, I need to watch it again just to get a repeat sense of the overall thing. But my impression is that movie has been incredibly polarizing. Although I will say this, I think it was wonderful that it basically killed the Oscars, and I love that Michelle Yeoh got her due.
Absolutely. I love that Jamie Lee Curtis won an Oscar for a character where in one of the most memorable scenes she plays someone with hot dog fingers. It makes me so happy. It makes me so goddamn happy. I can't even tell you.
By the
way,
I did not like Edward Norton in The Incredible Hulk.
I was actually going to say in our private chat here, you said Hulk was not a good Edward Norton film. No, it was a good Eric Bana film. The Incredible Hulk was not a good Edward Norton film.
As far as I'm concerned, the only Incredible Hulk out there is what's his face from the Avengers.
Oh, Mark Ruffalo.
Oh, Ruffalo. I thought you were going to say Bill Bixby.
I like Bill Bixby, but
Bill Bixby, that's my Hulk, buddy.
The problem,
not anymore.
Obviously. The problem with Bill Bixby's Incredible Hulk is every episode was essentially a clone of the one before, with a few exceptions. There was the one in there that did the most dangerous game thing, and that was interesting. But it was a rare exception to the rule.
I know I've talked
a good episode. Married was a good episode.
Merit is a good episode. I was just going to say, I know I've mentioned it before because I know we've talked about the Incredible Hulk before, but my favorite Hulk transformation is when he's making a phone call in a phone booth and he doesn't have correct change.
I don't have 25 cents.
The operator's like, please deposit 25 cents. And that's the thing that breaks him. And his eyes go white. And he goes, I don't have 25 cents. And he
I feel like we've all been there. Yeah.
It's so perfect.
Wait, that's not from the Bill Bixby show.
That's from the Bill Bixby show. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, season 1.
Yeah.
Never give a trucker.
Wow, you've got the title. Look at that. Yeah, that's one of the Bill Bixby ones. Yeah.
It was. Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it since I was a kid, so there's a lot that I don't remember, but I didn't remember that.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. I used to be scared of that show when I was a little kid. Really? I mean, I think it ended in '82, so I didn't really get to see it when it was originally on, but they showed it in reruns forever. And when I would see it when I was a little kid, whenever he would Hulk out, and you'd get the music sting and his eyes would go white, that scared the shit out of me.
It's the framing is like a horror movie.
It's like, oh shit, that's not good. But then as I got older,
the first, was you scared when you saw the first when he Hulked out? The first part 1 and part 2.
When it's like the original or no, I don't think I ever saw that episode until I was a grown up. When I was a kid, I found that they would show it in reruns, and then that was the mid '80s when they were doing the TV movies. So I kind of watched those and got used to it from those. And I mean, by the time I was maybe 9 or 10, I loved it. Like I had gotten past the fear part. But when I first saw it as maybe like a 5-year-old, I was like, oh, I'm not watching that, but I just had to get over it. And I did. Yeah. And now I have it on DVD. I have the entire series. It's one of my favorite shows. So.
And I've always wanted to see a show that did a similar thing with like werewolf. It's like the whole kind of thing. It's like you don't want this to happen, but it's still like killing and hurting bad people, and but that person always feels guilty after what happened.
See, I was always like, I was a kid. I was probably like 8 or 9 when the Hulk came on TV, and so I loved it. And of course, I loved Lou Ferrigno because he was this big giant guy, and look, beating up bad guys. I was like, that was my thing.
Yeah, can't go wrong there. And it's what I love about it, watching it today, is that it somehow manages, not all the time, but at its best, like it manages to actually get you to feel for this guy, for David,
Bixby was very good at that.
Yeah. And
like the courtship of Eddie's father, look at that, as another example of what Bixby could bring to a role.
Oh, almost all of his TV roles had an element where he just, as an actor, knew how to find the pathos of whatever he was doing. But I mean, you watch The Incredible Hulk and you're like, boy, I really feel, they play the fucking not Kenneth Johnson, but the piano music at the end. And it's just like, you feel so horrible for him. It's like, oh, it's so sad. It's the goofiest show you could ever like. He gets mad and he turns into a big green guy. Like, it's the dumbest possible, but you watch it and you're like, oh God, poor guy. He can't go home. People think he's dead. He's always on the run. It gets you. It really gets you. And yeah,
it's not what a show it's about. It's not what a show is about. It's how it's about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like you can make any bad premise good if you do it right.
Oh yeah. Well, and my favorite, my favorite Hulk is Mark Ruffalo in The Avengers. Because to your point about feeling for him is when he comes in, and when they're on the carry, he's like, how I keep calm, and he basically says about how he got low and he tried to kill himself and all that. And so you really feel like, he's tormented by that. And so then he said, well, I tried to do something good. I went out there and I tried to hide and try to help people, and you pulled me back into this, circus, That and of course the great line, that's my secret, Captain.
Yeah.
I'm always angry.
I'm always angry. One of the best lines in that movie. It's like, oh hell yeah. And
but be fair, Steve. Bill Bixby during the time of the Incredible Hulk lost his son, got a divorce, and his wife died. he carried all of that with his show. So he brought some of that emotion into his character. And I think it really
absolutely. Bill Bixby was one of those actors where it's like, I mean, especially in The Incredible Hulk, because again, like that's such a goofy premise, and it could easily have not been that good of a show if it didn't have someone like him in the center of it. But it's like you watch it and you go, God damn, you're too good for this show, man. Like you're so good. And I mean, because like occasionally, like to bring it back to Star Trek real quick before we wrap up, you know, every once in a while you'll see something in like a Star Trek show, and usually for me it's like a guest actor, you know, like seeing David Warner show up, or seeing like Louise Fletcher playing Kai Wynn on Deep Space Nine, and you're like, God damn, you're too good for this Star Trek shit. What are you doing here? Like, not to denigrate Star Trek, because I love it, but it's like, holy shit, like you're like a really good actor, you know, like for real.
Well, but to me, I think what that also says is how much, because I mean, obviously, you know, people, especially people of that caliber, they have choices of what they work on, right? For the most part. So when somebody like that, they work on you know, Star Trek or Babylon 5 or whatever, and it lends that credence to, hey, they saw that, and like, and we know, look, there are people who asked to be in Star Trek shows, they asked to be in Babylon 5, they asked to be in Star Wars, whatever it is, that they feel so strongly about it that that they want to be a part of it, and so that to me was so great. You know, you look at like, you know, Majel Barrett when she's on Babylon 5, you know, that one episode is, you know, Lady Ladira, you know, and she lends so much credence to that episode and what's going on, and what she says to Londo about basically, you have 3 opportunities to avoid the fate that awaits you. And she gives him the warning, and she says it very seriously. This is all we see, and this is all we wish to see. You know, and she just has that. She has this gravitas that she brings to the role.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and,
that, you know, bearing, that strength of, and the conviction of what she's saying, and yet it's perfectly understated.
I think it's Babylon 5 is a, you know, 'cause one of the reasons why actors wanted to be on Babylon 5 was because Babylon 5 in the 90s was one of the only shows, and Star Trek to a lesser extent, but I think Babylon 5 usually, you know, like it created characters that you can see would be fun for an actor to play, you know, whether it was a guest character or a recurring character or a regular, like where an actor could really sink their teeth into it and really actually, and do some acting, you know? And you watch like some of those scenes between, especially Londo and Jakar, because they had such a fraught relationship and such a complex dynamic. And again, like with the Incredible Hulk, like you take a step back away from it and you look at it, and you realize like this, you know, this is like a great dramatic scene, and I'm totally into these characters. Look at his hair. Look at his makeup. Look at the costumes. Look at how fucking ridiculous this all is. And yet it completely draws you in, so that it doesn't even occur to you to think like, these are 2 people wearing ridiculous costumes pretending that they're in space. You know, like it doesn't even enter into it. It's like the perfect example of suspension of disbelief, where it's outrageous. It's so fake. It's so ridiculous. But because the emotion is real, and because you believe that they really mean what they're saying when they say it, like that's really all you need.
Well, here's another good example. Fabiana Odenio, she plays Adira. And so she's in the first season episode of Born to the Purple, and then she's also in the fifth season episode Day of the Dead. And basically, so, you know, obviously, you know, Londo falls for her, and when she leaves, you're kind of left with an open question, because when she says goodbye, my ambassador, so she was sad that she hurt Londo, but what did she really feel for Londo? But then when you see her then in season 5, you find no, she actually had genuine love for him, but she couldn't deal with the situation at the time. It was too fresh. It was, you know, and that makes what happens to her and what happens to Londo because of it sting even more, because you wonder, hey, if she had only been able to come back to him and not have been taken out by Morden, maybe Londo doesn't do a whole bunch of bad shit that he does. You know, maybe he goes on a different path, because he would have actually had real love.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Anyway,
anyway, we're 15 minutes past the hour, so I'm about to wrap it up. So, Geek, did you have something you wanted to say before we close up shop?
Just no social alchemy today. Not only is Isaiah's at the Autism Art Show, but like John Brockman's busy, so there won't be any social alchemy today. I'll stream later today on the Twitch. Serious Mind has a YouTube channel. He hasn't posted like anything on it for a while, but go check out Serious Mind's YouTube channel. Isaiah Jane also has a YouTube channel. Go and check.
Channels actually, and I've got a gaming one that I'm trying to put more effort into. So it's people look up as Gaming with Azalea Jane.
Gaming with Azalea Jane. I'll add that to like the links and plugs to put at the end of the show. Russell asked us where can Babylon 5 be streamed. It is on Tubi actually, and that's the like free streaming service. You're going to get ads, but like there's a lot of like classic shows that are on there that you can like watch.
There's a lot of stuff on Tubi. Yeah. If you're okay watching with ads, like there's a ton of stuff on Tubi. Yeah.
I have one parting thing real quick. If you want to feel good for a few seconds, look for a video on YouTube called Marjorie Taylor Greene Silenced at Hearing. So basically she creates a scene during a hearing, calls somebody a liar, basically makes a horrible show of it, and then she gets shut down by someone from her own party who basically says that you are out of line and your time has been withdrawn. Basically, you can't talk anymore because you're out.
I saw that some time back. It is beautiful. Epic.
I'm gonna have to find that. I haven't seen that. I'm gonna have to find that.
Oh, and Steve, what do you have coming up on your YouTube channel this week? You mentioned that video that you're putting up on Monday. What else can we look forward to?
Well, funny you should mention that. I have a video, a bonus video or an extra video, whatever. I usually don't put videos up on Sundays other than when we do these streams, but I have a video going up this afternoon that I did last week about one of the nerdiest things I've ever made a video about, which is talking about the designs of various pro wrestling championship belts. It was I had thoughts and I had to get the poison out, so I made that video.
Wow.
So that goes up. I think at 3 Eastern on the channel. And then tomorrow is the video I mentioned earlier about the Nicholas Alaverdian thing and how he might not be extradited because of how terrible our prisons are. And then Wednesday I have a video going up that I'm working on later today.
Bring Cisco back.
I have a video going up on Wednesday about the different ways that people use the terms Trekkie and Trekker. Because somebody put up, speaking of the Picard reviews that Jason and I did, someone left a comment on our last episode review where they said something, the basic gist of it is, well, Steve is a Trekker because he cares about the writing of the show and et cetera, et cetera. And Jason is a Trekkie because all he cares about is seeing the ships and the pew-pews. And which is not fair to Jason. It's not fair to you.
I wish the audience can see my face.
I like both of these.
I was saying that reminds me. I loved the pedant joke on the last.
Oh God, I loved doing it.
Good.
I loved doing it, and I knew as soon as I saw that comment, I knew exactly what I was going to do with it, and I was like, I can't wait. So yeah, I loved doing that. I loved doing that.
You kept it so straight. It was very good.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much too. All right. So anyway, that's Wednesday, and that's all. We will be back we'll be back in about a month to do this again. This is something that I do every month with my patrons and channel members. Patreon.com/Steve Shives if you want to become a patron and help me out to continue producing the channel, or click the join button to become a channel member on YouTube. The benefits for both are the same. And one of the benefits is you get the opportunity to hang out with me for an hour and change sometimes on the last Sunday of every month. So thanks all of you who were with me in the call this time around. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody who's a patron or a member for helping me to keep doing this. And we'll see you in about a month to do it all again. Bye everybody.
Bye. Everyone take care of yourselves to the best of your ability.